The ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian Islamic Jihad lasted a total of 8 minutes over the weekend as rockets flared into southern Israel shortly after the ceasefire was announced. To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, that wasn't much of a ceasefire. Were there any casualties?
There's been many casualties. Let me start from the beginning. The story of Israel and its terrorist adversaries, it cannot be told through the number of casualties. And I say that because what the media fails to report is the number of casualties committed by accident by the terrorists themselves. And I say by accident because I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But what's happening is that they haphazardly are launching so many, over 1,200 at this point. I think that number is well near 1,500 at this point, missiles into Israel. And these rockets are falling short. So they're falling right into Gaza. So these so-called defenders or advocates of the Palestinians are killing actual Palestinians. There was a video over the weekend that we broke on the foreign desk where it fell short right into Gaza, killed 5 children. Again, these stories are not being told. They will use the same footage, those same pictures of dead children and say that the Israelis killed them because obviously there is this moral equivalency of Israel having a formal military and they are just a terrorist organization throwing rocks and grenades and rockets. Who knows where they got them from? We know where they got them from, actually. But the story goes like this. The Iranian regime sits in Tehran, funds this terror. They give them the weapons, they give them the money, they give them the pay for slave, meaning the money that goes to the families of those who are suicide bombers and die in the line of fire. And so they incentivize this terrorism, and Israel is fighting it on all sides. So there's Hezbollah in Lebanon, there's Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, there's Hamas in Gaza, and it's never ending. So how do we expect there to be a ceasefire when there's not 2 sovereign nations? What are they even fighting for? There's a terror organization that will stop at nothing. They want Israel off the map. So if Israel still is existing, they're going to keep on lobbing those rockets into civilian areas, by the way. Again, many reports about how Israel waits for these targeted attacks. If there are any civilians in the way, they will wait for these targeted attacks until the civilians get out of the way. But how these terror organizations purposely target civilian areas like bars and discos and pizza shops and schools and so on to get the highest number of Israeli casualties as possible. Thank goodness for the Iron Dome. We know a lot of Democrats and one Republican who voted against that Iron Dome, but it is the technology over Israel that, like a dome, catches these missiles from going into civilian areas and obviously causing many more casualties than we have.
It's never ending. Wow. Lisa, Iran's foreign minister says he wants a realistic response from the United States to Iran's proposals at talks in Vienna in hopes of reviving the Iran nuclear deal. Indirect talks between the United States and Iran began last Thursday.
Oh, my goodness. The fact that we're at this again, another round of talks when the Iranian regime has not shown any signs of being a worthy partner of a deal. They have just recently threatened to bomb New York City. They are flexing their muscles. They are importing terror, as we know, exporting terror, as we know. They are continuing with the threats, and yet they sit at the negotiating table while their centrifuges are spinning, while they are enriching uranium at over 60%. And they say, you know what, United States, you need to be more realistic. Well, if the United States were realistic, we wouldn't be back at the negotiating table begging for another deal from a terrorist partner that has denied access to inspectors, that has shut off its surveillance cameras, and is not being honest with us. So I don't know where this is going, but the fact that the United States and Europe is at it again and stopping at nothing to get a deal is not good news, not for national security, not for global security, and for the people of Iran who are warning us against this regime and telling us that the government will use that money not for the people, but to put money back into terror, as it has done time and time again.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the war in Ukraine right now, Lisa. Russia's beefing up its military presence in southern Ukraine, renewing concerns that they could be preparing to launch a new war offensive. Now, Lisa, up to 1,000 Russian troops have already been deployed to Crimea.
Yes, this keeps shifting on us. So it looks like Russia has had a few obstacles, a few dead ends that it has met along the way. And we keep hearing stories about how they will, revamp, whether it's the military, putting in a new line of defense, trying a new strategy, and now completely refocusing its geographically, starting from the south and going up. Look, eventually they're going to get this. I mean, no matter how many billions of dollars the United States and others pledge to help Ukraine, this is a lost war. And the bad news is that Zelensky is now asking China to step in and have talks and perhaps bring in China with its money and influence to rebuild Ukraine, or to at least help have China help curb Russia through diplomatic means, if that's even possible. But this is not a good situation. I mean, the realignment of these nations, rogue nations against the West, does not bode well for the future of geopolitics. And again, Ukraine, a lot of money, a lot of weapons there, and we're not seeing much progress on the side of the Ukrainians. But the Russians, they're at it. So I think it's going to be a matter of time. The Ukrainians don't want to become Russian citizens, but they may have to at the end of the day.
Now, speaking of Russia, WNBA star Brittney Griner was sentenced to 9 years in a Russian prison on drug possession and smuggling charges, a move that was denounced by U.S. President Joe Biden. Lisa, could this potentially lead to a prisoner swap with Russia, bringing Griner back to the United States?
That's what Russia is hoping for, because the swap would be obviously extremely unfair to the United States, with a petty crime criminal like Griner, who is being held on marijuana charges. The maximum sentence for her was 10 years, and that's why she pled guilty, to hope to get some sort of clemency from the Russian courts. But she got 9 years, which obviously is extremely a harsh punishment for possession of marijuana. Now, what the Russians are hoping for is a prisoner exchange with Viktor Bout. He is known as the Merchant of Death. He is an arms dealer, and they're hoping to get him back. So it's no coincidence that we have an American hostage there. We have two, in fact, Wellen as well, who may be exchanged for this Merchant of Death, and another. So it would be two in exchange for two, but it is two small crime criminals for two major global, internationally recognized criminals. And again, that's the game that Russia's playing. They're always one step ahead of this in this chess game. And it's no coincidence that she was arrested right before the invasion of Ukraine, and now faces either 9 years or, again, a very dangerous prisoner swap.
Wasn't Griner also quite critical of the U.S. government and the U.S. military?
Yes, there's been so many memes on social media making fun of, well, now she doesn't have to hear the Star-Spangled Banner for 9 years, or now she doesn't have to look at the American flag for 9 years. And while that is perhaps a bit harsh, it's meant as a principle to say, she was representing the United States, playing in the Women's National Basketball Association, and would not come out of the locker room for the national anthem. She was very critical of the United States, and now I'm thinking she was hoping that she'd be caught with marijuana in the United States to see that crime versus the punishment that she is receiving in Russia. So yes, it is ironic for somebody who is that critical of the United States to now be begging Joe Biden at the White House to get her out. Hopefully, regardless of how this ends, she will at least have a different view and more appreciation for her country.
Lisa, China is carrying out its fourth consecutive day of military drills in the air and on the sea near Taiwan. Now, this follows U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island nation. Now, a spokesperson for the People's Liberation Army said the purpose of the drills was to really test long-range military capabilities.
Sure, they can say whatever they want. Obviously, Chinese propaganda has gotten better and better over time. This is obviously a very symbolic and optical lesson or kind of warning to Taiwan and the United States, frankly, for Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. They warned against it. They said, let her not become the woman who starts off a huge military crisis because of her visit. They were very obviously very much against the U.S. showing solidarity with Taiwan, and now want to flex their muscles and say we're here too. And in response, the United States is conducting its own drills in India, right next door, to show that we're in the region also. Look, this is not something we want to escalate, but it looks like it's heading in that direction. But Nancy Pelosi made her trip, and that she was very adamant about making it and making herself relevant in that way in terms of foreign policy.
And the U.S. military announced that it'll be holding training exercises with India near the disputed border territory with China, and the exercises are planned for October. This may heighten tensions even further?
Exactly. I think there's no coincidence that the United States wants to have a presence there and want to maybe confirm or fortify its relations with neighboring countries that will have to be involved, regardless of whether they want to or not, if there should be a conflict in that region. Look, the neighbors are upset with China as well. They know that China wants to extend its influence and has been doing so. So yes, the United States is partnering up and saying we're going to be doing our own drills and we're going to be doing our own testing, and it's a message to China whether they want to hear it or not.
Now, Lisa, I want to talk to you a bit about the wildfire season right now, the middle of summer. It's pretty bad in British Columbia and the Okanagan here in Canada, also in Newfoundland on the East Coast. What's it like where you are in LA, in Southern California?
It's been horrific. It's been hitting the national parks here. We saw reports of record acreages burning, and it's very unfortunate because it's this time of year when people want to visit these areas, and the people who are living in surrounding areas are obviously very much affected and evacuated. Yeah, it's something to look out for. Here in Los Angeles, we've been actually better this year than we were last year, although there have been some peripheral fires, and we see signs everywhere warning. But here and there, we do smell some fire in the air, but in the areas that are in the immediate proximity of Los Angeles, it's been better, and the temperatures have been more mild.
Now, before I let you go, I wanted to chat politics with you a little bit here. Word is that Donald Trump is thinking of running again for the next federal election. What are you hearing?
Yes, it seems that way. Well, he was at CPAC Dallas over the weekend, and he's trying to rally up some support. He has a lot of support. He actually won the straw poll at CPAC, and Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, was in a distant second place. But many are cautioning Donald Trump from being that divisive politician to come onto the scene again and really divide America more than it already has been divided, and asking for him to perhaps think about throwing his support behind a more likable candidate. I don't like to use that word because Donald Trump is in fact very liked by his own base. There's a knee-jerk reaction to many others about Donald Trump, and I don't know how easy it will be to get the moderates on board with Donald Trump, not because they don't agree with his policy, but because they're just not in a place where they want to see America divided again. Look, we have a ton of inflation here. We have a recession. We have so many economic problems, and Donald Trump may be the one to fix that. But again, we're suffering culturally and politically as a country, and we're extremely divided like never before. So unless we want to see, a civil war, a secession of California and New York and who knows where else, it might be a wise idea to see, some support behind some other, fresh faces that may be able to bring in center and center right folks to vote for Republican candidates. And it doesn't look like Joe Biden, that the Democrats want Joe Biden to run again. When you have CNN saying, well, Hunter Biden's laptop is going to be an issue, I think they're really hoping that Biden moves out of the way so that the Democrats do have a chance, because with the poll numbers right now, the approval numbers for Kamala and Joe are extremely low, and it doesn't look like they would be reelected. So it's going to be interesting as we move closer to the 2024 election.
It's also interesting how you say fresher faces. How about some younger faces as well? It seems like in order to become U.S. president, you have to be at least mid to late 70s. Maybe somebody a little bit younger, like maybe mid 50s,
Correct. Yes. And you know what, that exactly, because we want political longevity. We want somebody who perhaps could stay for 8 years, or if they do stay for 4, at least they have the ability to be, cognitively present and to make the trips that are very difficult and to work those long hours. Look, Donald Trump did a great job. He had a stamina of, the youngest of presidents, but he's older now, and it's going to be another 4 years and another 2 years. So it's going to be 6 years out from now. Yes, it's going to gonna play a role. I think age will play a role. So I think if a younger candidate who has experience but has that, that passion and drive, that would be ideal.
She's our political reporter and foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Thanks again for joining us from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.